Welcome back. You are listening to Chapter 13, the first lesson, which is 13.5. 13.5. You're going to find it helpful that your textbook is open because there are many examples in the textbook that are going to help you understand kind of the vocab, the terminology that's happening in this lesson here. Okay, so lesson 13.5, learning target is, I can identify populations and sampling methods. So today we're talking about samplings of certain populations, surveys, okay? So let's define a few things here. A survey is a study of one or more characteristics of a particular group. The entire group you want information about is called the population. You may find it difficult to survey an entire population, so instead you can survey something called a sample, which is part of a population. And there are 5 different types of samples. So to give you kind of a pictorial example here of what these 3 words mean, let's just say in this rectangle here I have my population. Okay, population is all these people. It could be the population of Skyview students, population of Oakdale, Minnesota, population of Minnesota, who knows, okay? So the entire box is the population. However, when you take a survey, say you wanted to take a survey of your favorite food, you're not going to be able to survey every single person in the population that you choose. So then people then choose to take a sample out of the population. Okay, a sample is a part of the population that's taken out to represent the population. Okay, that's kind of what an sample is here. Okay, so down below, let's talk about the different kind of sampling methods we have going here. So in the population, remember you can't survey an entire population because it's just too overwhelming, too many people, so you take a sample. Well, 5 different kinds of samples. This chart comes straight from your textbook on page 871. I'll just pull this out here, and what you're going to do, we're going to go through each 5 of these samples here, and you're just going to summarize, or you can write the entire definition down. It's up to you. These are your notes, whatever helps you better understand it, okay? So the first kind of sample is called the random sample. The random sample here is every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected, okay? So super random here. So for example, I want to survey favorite subject at Skyview Middle School. My population would be Skyview Middle School students, and my random sample, because I'm not going to ask all 900 or 800 middle school students at Skyview, or however many middle school students we have at Skyview, I'm going to take a random sample and I'm just going to survey every 10th person on a list of names, okay? Random, super random, every 10th person of the 700, 800 students. Okay, our second example, stratified random sample. That's where the population is divided into distinct groups and members are selected at random from each group. Okay, so in other words, population divided into distinct groups. It could be distinct groups meaning all boys, all girls. Those are 2 distinct groups, and then members are selected at random from each group. So if I wanted to, for example, go back to my surveying favorite subject, I'm going to split my 2 groups, my middle schoolers, into boys or girls, and I'm going to pull some girls to survey, and then pull some boys to survey as well, okay? Third one, systematic sample. It's a rule to select members of the population, okay? So a specific rule. So systematic rule. So for example, I just come up with a rule. So all my middle school students at Skyview. But my rule is that I'm going to select all kids that have birthdays in December. Okay? I just made up a rule. So I only would sample kids that have birthdays in December. Okay? Fourth one, convenience sample. Only members of the population who are easily accessible that are selected to take my survey. So what this means is if I'm going to take my survey of favorite subjects in middle school, an convenience sample would be if I just surveyed all my classes. Okay, the classes that I teach. Why is that convenient? Because I see all my classes every day. I don't have to go and seek out other kids from other classes. I don't have to go out of my way because all my kids sit in my room. It's convenient to me just to survey those kids. And the last sample, self-selected sample. Members of the population select themselves by volunteering. So volunteer-based. So this kind of sample would be talking about the same survey, favorite subject. And let's say I just made a lot of surveys, some half sheets, and I put them in the office and I said, whoever wants to fill them out, you fill them out. Whoever comes to the office, you can fill it out. It's self-selected, so I'm not going out of my way and asking someone to fill out a survey. It's if you happen to go in the office and you happen to see my survey and you want to fill it out, you fill it out. Okay? So those are kind of the 5 different samples you can go about when you survey a particular population, what kind of samples you can dig out of. Okay, so in your GP, in your practice, you're gonna come across different examples where you're gonna have to identify the sampling method. Think about kind of the keywords. Random sample would be everyone has an equal chance. Stratified random sample would be you divide into groups and then selected randomly from there. Systematic rule. Convenience is easily accessible. And then self-selected, you're volunteering to actually take the survey. A few other things that you're going to have to encounter when you take surveys here, okay? There's something called a biased sample. So first of all, you have to know what biased means, okay? Bias basically means that you favor one way or the other in an unfair way, okay? So for example, I'm biased to my own children. I think they're the cutest kids in the entire world. But of course, that's a biased opinion because they're my children, okay? So what's a biased sample? Now, every sample that you choose for your survey, you have to make sure that it's not biased. It's not leaning towards one way of your survey, so then it becomes unfair, okay? So a biased sample is a sample chosen for a survey, should be representative of the population. A biased sample is a sample that is not representative. In a biased sample, parts of the population may be overrepresented or may be underrepresented. So, for example, let me give you an example here. Let's say that, again, I'm always going to go back to my default survey here. My survey is, I want to find out what your favorite subject is, okay? My population is the middle school students, Skyview middle school students, let's say. Now, sample-wise, let's pretend I chose all accelerated students. Now, that would be a systematic sample here. Systematic, remember, there was a rule that I used to select members of my population. So my rule was accelerated students. Well, what makes this a biased sample? A biased sample. A sample chosen for a survey should be representative, but all accelerated students are not representative of my survey, okay? And the reason why is because if I only survey accelerated students, say my accelerated math students, okay? Now, majority of accelerated math students are in accelerated math because they enjoy math, because they're good at math. Okay, so you're going to get a lot of maybe my favorite subject is math. Okay, a little bit heavier weighted from the accelerated students. So biased, you're overrepresenting the math kids in the math subject in accelerated students. Okay, a non-biased. So a bettered sample would be non-biased, okay? I wouldn't just choose all accelerated students. I might want to go with, instead of a systematic sample here, I'm going to erase this here, I would probably go with random sample, okay? Random sample, that way I can make sure I get a little bit of feedback from just random people, not picking and choosing if they're an accelerated or non-accelerated. So, for example, I would just survey every 10th student that is on an alphabetical order roster, okay? So I'd want to, non-bias would be every 10th student on a list, That would be super random. That way I'm not picking and choosing every accelerated student to survey, okay? Bias questions. Now when you set up a survey, you have to obviously, you question people to take your survey on what you're looking to gain information on, okay? But when people create surveys, you have to be careful on the way you question people, okay? So a question that encourages a particular response would be a bias question. Survey questions should be worded to avoid bias. So for example, a bias question will look something like this. Don't you agree that the voting age should be lowered to 16 because many 16-year-olds are responsible and informed? So in other words, this is pretty biased. It's trying to, by questioning this in this way, by asking, first of all, with the phrase, don't you agree? And then adding on the whole, because many 16-year-olds are responsible and informed, you're kind of getting your person to answer the question. You're trying to get them to agree with you, lean towards that 16 is probably old enough or should be lowered. Okay, it's not really, it's not very neutral sounding. So in other words, a better way to ask the same question, so you're not getting a favorable answer, you're trying to convince your man, I'm having a hard time talking today. Convince your person that you're surveying to lean one way or the other would be just simply asking, do you think that the voting age should be lowered to 16? Simple as that, straight to the point, none of this fluffy, don't you agree, or I think it should because all 16-year-olds or many 16-year-olds are responsible and informed. No need to add any of those adjectives. Okay. So that was a lot. That was a lot of talking, and I hope that was clear, and if not, I'm hoping you're coming with your questions. And again, if you open up to page 13.5 of your textbook, a lot of it, skim through that. Look at the examples. It will kind of solidify many of these different methods and examples that I'm trying to get across to you. So let's close with the summary here. My first summary piece is giving you that picture representative. Remember, when we take surveys on something that we want to find information on, we survey a certain population, and a population would be all these people. Okay, but sometimes with time and resources, we don't have time to survey every single person in the population we're talking about. So this is why we take samples. Okay, we take a sample out of the population, and there are 5 different kinds of samples that you could go about taking, and that part is in your notes. And then the last part is, when you take a survey, you do have to make sure that your samples and your questions are not biased. They're not leaning towards a particular outcome. You need to make sure that they're fair samples and that they're fair questions that you're asking. So biased samples and questions lean to a particular outcome. Okay, and you don't want biased samples or questions if you want fair information, okay, to represent your entire population. All right, well, thanks for listening.